Hey guys, it's Andrew Dobie here with Just a Chat With. If this is your first listen, Just a Chat With is a podcast series where we talk brand and creativity with the world's best in class. In the last episode, I sat down with Gavin Quirk, who is the head of fulfillment and operations in the global creative production team at Netflix. With nearly 20 years of experience in brand and marketing strategy, Gavin started his career in London at Diageo, working on brands like Guinness, Jose Cuervo, and Three Barrels Brandy. I had an amazing time with Gavin talking strategy, so go check that one out. Before now, though, we've had people on the podcast like founder of Fantasy Interactive, David Martin, world-renowned designer Michael Wolff, brand legend and author of The Brand Gap, Marty Neumeier, and many, many more. In today's episode, though, I've just finished recording with Andy Nairn, who's one of the co-founders of Lucky Generals in London. Andy was in his home in London, and we talked about all sorts of great stuff, like their recent Amazon ad for the Super Bowl. We talked about definition of brand. We also talked about his latest book, Go Luck Yourself, which is currently available for pre-order. And we also talked about Dolly Parton. We had an amazing time, so enjoy. So, hey everyone, and welcome to episode 24 of Just a Chat With. I'm your host, Andrew Dobie. Today, I'm very excited as we're here with Andy Nairn. Andy is the founding partner of Lucky Generals, or one of the founding partners of Lucky Generals, which have offices in London and New York. With nearly 30 years experience in the creative industry, Andy is now one of the most respected and renowned brand strategists. As one of the UK's most successful creative agencies, Lucky Generals have done and are famed for their amazing work for the likes of Amazon, Yorkshire Tea, Paddy Power, and the Co-op, and many, many, many more. They've also been shortlisted for Campaign Magazine's Agency of the Year for the last 5 years in a row. Andy has been named the country's top strategist for the last 2 years in a row, and one of the top 5 creative people in the world of advertising by Business Insider. And now Andy wants to share some of his luck with others. So look at us. He's donating his royalties from his first book, Go Luck Yourself, to Commercial Break, an organisation that helps working class talent break into the creative industries. We'll talk more about Andy's book in just a moment. Andy grew up in the Scottish borders, but now has worked in London since 1993, apart from a short period living in San Francisco. He now lives out in the sticks in Berkshire. Is that correct, Andy?
Yeah, that's right.
We've got that right. He's been married for 21 years and has 3 children, ages 19, 15 and 12. So probably a very busy house during lockdown, I'd imagine. Andy also plays all sorts of musical instruments very badly, I read, and supports a variety of frustrating sports teams. Andy, thanks so much for being here. So great to have you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on. Because that's like This Is Your Life or something like that.
I know.
A life flashing before me, I'm drowning or something like that, which is quite a good metaphor for the last year or so, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's always funny actually when you read that. It's very difficult to read these long paragraphs out, but I always like seeing the expression on people's faces as they're reminded by things they'd forgotten that had happened in their life. Or
there's no right expression, because you basically end up wanting to punch yourself through most of it. You're thinking, God, he sounds quite smug and sort of happy with himself. Or other bits you're going, oh, bloody hell, 30 years, I feel ancient now. But technically, all the details were technically correct, so I can't really pick you up on anything.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad we got that. We got that all correct. You know, how have been things treating you? 2020, 2021, the world's longest combined year. How have things been?
Well, that's the nature of it, isn't it? We've all sort of lost track of time, and it does feel like it's been a sort of a century rather than a year. It's good. It's been an adjustment for all of us. Work-wise, we've been a bit luckier than most. You know, we've got a couple of very big clients who have been right at the thick of all things. Of lockdown, you know, so Amazon and Co-op have obviously been really busier than ever, actually. So we were a bit insulated from some of the worst effects by having those two clients and a couple of other ones that have done really well. But like everyone, it's not been always plain sailing, and there's been a lot of unforeseen difficulties. You just have to try and go with the punches, I think.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point you mentioned there. Is actually, if you survived through that last year, it was a lot down to luck of, the makeup of your clients, isn't it? Amazon, as you say, e-commerce, and they were already heading in a great direction. And the co-op, I mean, my local shop is a co-op, and I've never been there more than I have in my life. And it's the same with us in our agency. We had some food and drink, we had some healthcare, and luckily those two things were some of the least in terms of impact.
Yeah, that's right.
So I suppose then, in terms of you've had obviously a very busy year just in terms of the normal stuff that you have to do running a business and adapting to all of this, but also specifically, you've just you've had a Super Bowl ad out, you've been working on launching a book. Do you want to talk us through a little bit about? Well, go for which either one you wish first.
We've been busy on all sorts of things. We've been working on Super Bowl spots for Amazon for the last 3 years now. I think this is our third year, and it's just an amazing privilege, and it's quite a funny thing for us to do. From our office because this was done from our office in London rather than we do have an office now in New York, but it was a funny thing. And when we were first approached to do it 3 years ago for the first time, it was really weird, because then we were a much smaller agency in London, and couldn't really claim to understand even the beginnings of the rules of American football, let alone the culture of the Super Bowl. So it's been a great thing to work on, obviously, with such a culturally important brand as Amazon. And what you don't realize is not really there's not an equivalent in this country really of an event which is such a cultural moment where the whole nation really does stop and watches, and in particular that they stop and watch the ads. I mean, people were, really, they vote on them afterwards. So there's a huge public vote that's organised by USA Today. And the first time we did this, we were the first British agency to ever win the public vote for the best advertising. Wow. And actually this year we were third, sort of thing. So we're a top 3 finisher is our sort of consistent.
No, it's not bad.
Not too bad. But it's just a fascinating, and they're a very interesting client to work with, because they're very smart themselves. They're very creative. They've got a creative department, which is obviously quite a big thing in the industry these days. Working with in-house creatives. So that's been a fabulous journey with us. So that's on the biggest stage of all. But we've also had lots of fun, doing sort of much more sort of small, local things, and for much more British brands like Yorkshire Tea and I
loved the Yorkshire Tea thing. I thought that was fantastic. With the big long spouts.
Yeah, that was a funny thing. So we've worked with Yorkshire Tea. What we try and do with all our clients is we don't always want to have millions of clients. We wanted a smaller client list, but have longer relationships and deeper relationships. So we really like working with the people we're working with, and it's a nice thing to be able to choose. When you're running your own agency, you can sort of, as you can pick, within certain parameters, you can choose who you work with. And Yorkshire Tea have been lovely as well, in a very different way than Amazon, obviously. But we've had this idea about doing things proper, because it's like a real Yorkshire word, that isn't it? And we actually spotted it on the factory wall when we're going around. It said, "We do things proper." And we thought, that's really, really nice. We'll lift that, and we turned it into an idea which was where everything's done proper. And then when you've got a big, powerful brand idea like that you're running through everything, then when something like lockdown happens, it's much easier to react and adjust. Yeah. And so what we did was we thought, okay, well, if we're doing everything proper, how could we help people in lockdown, especially when we're all coming back into work and we're going to make our first cup of tea? It's going to be a bit awkward. And so we thought we'd give people a proper laugh. And we sort of created this ridiculous long-spouted teapot, which was absolutely rubbish at doing its job, but sort of served the point to kind of say, yeah, we're all going to feel a bit, anxious or nervous about being in close proximity to that. So that was a big hit last autumn, I suppose, at a time when we all thought that was, going to be us back for good. And of course, it turned out not to be the case, but hopefully it will be now.
I think what was nice about it in my mind when I saw it and it came up in the feed, and first of all, obviously didn't know it was you until I read further. But I think a lot of brands are scared to touch humor. And very initially, especially with COVID, you're kind of, because you realize that it impacts everyone in different way, shape, or form, and some people's lost their jobs, some people health, and so on. But I think the humor does a great thing. It kind of, it then gave other brands permission to go, right, okay, we can start to do that again. Have you got any tips for, like, in terms of when you were approaching that, in terms of strategic thinking, how did you persuade Yorkshire Tea that this was the right moment to take, or that you felt confident that it was the right move?
Well, as I say, I think it's so much easier once a brand has got like a really clear sense of what they are all about in the first place, then you're not having to undergo sort of psychoanalysis, in the middle of a crisis sort of thing is a difficult thing. So because they have got a very clearly defined tone of voice, they feel very confident about who they are, then it didn't take much persuading. I mean, we were all conscious of not wanting to, it is, to use that cliche that we kept on getting told, it was unprecedented times. So we didn't want to do something that was going to, misstep or misjudge the moment. But we did really feel, we did a lot of research, and everyone was saying just what you said, was just, God, we all need to have a laugh as well. This is precisely in times of crisis, you need to be able to smile, and it's a release, isn't it? And obviously you would choose your topics. There's some things you wouldn't want to make fun of, but it's sort of, if your brand is already a funny, light-hearted brand, as Yorkshire Teas is, then you should behave in a crisis. Just, you should apply that, and not suddenly turn into somebody different. I think it'd be different actually to be somebody like the Co-op, for instance, who is not, I don't think a funny brand. It doesn't try to be a comedian. It's a much more soulful, spiritual. It's got some real. It's 175 years old, and it's all about the collective good. So it's got an amazing sort of brand purpose. But if they started cracking jokes, I think we'd all be thinking, God, what's the Co-op doing? Sometimes we can have a bit of a light-hearted tone, but I think they wouldn't have done something like that. But then they were able to respond in much more Co-op ways, like working with Marcus Rashford. That's what they did best. So I think the trick is to behave in your own character rather than suddenly
trying to be someone else.
It doesn't work. So they did. We got together with Marcus Rashford and Fair Share, and gave up some of our airtime to raise money for charity and food poverty and stuff like that. So it's horses for courses, really. And the brands, I think, that have really struggled are the ones that didn't quite know what they were all about, or suddenly started talking in very somber tones with a little tinkly piano track in the background.
I found that, I found it really interesting, when, you'd watch Boris Johnson be on, and then you would see the ad breaks thereafter, and you almost could feel brands scrambling to, how do we talk now? And should people have masks on in adverts? And, it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes. And so that, everybody ended up being the same. And it was just sort of generic COVID tone of voice. But within that, there were lots of opportunities to do different things, and that was a fun thing. One of the funnest things I think we did was quite a small thing, but we worked with a property website called Zupla, and of course they were sort of more or less inactive for quite a big stretch of the lockdown because the housing market sort of ceased to exist. But there was a lot of pent up demand because, of course, we're all sitting in, like I'm in now, in this little room, absolutely sick of the sight of this room, and we're all starting to plot our, we either want to move out to the country or get a bigger place, or the kids have got to get separate bedrooms because driving us mad, or whatever it is. And so everyone was sort of wanting to think about property, and so but they couldn't do anything about it. They couldn't go and visit or do viewing. So that was a bit of a challenge for them. And so what we did was we sort of saw on social media that a lot of people were making home forts, like you do your kids, like the cushions and blankets, and so we did a competition to do that, and then to list them in the style of estate agents, this beautiful bijou little number with a lovely cushion roof, and it was just a fun way to get the brand top of mind, even though you couldn't actually buy from us at that moment in time.
Yeah, and that's it's so nice that, and it's something, it's been able to spot those little things. Like I always, I were building forts in the bedroom with my son the other night, and it's sometimes there's a weird point in where you've got to, for a second, stop enjoying the moment and think about what the moment is, isn't there, to kind of identify it?
Exactly. It's sort of just being mindful, and I guess that's been part of the journey, isn't it, of the last year. Just there are lots of bad stuff going on, but trying to enjoy bits of the moment and adjust to them and turn them into good things has been
exactly. I think that's the trick of the strategist, the planner, that the creative. If you've got to kind of try and see with different lenses, haven't you, at the same time? Yeah.
Definitely.
So I suppose jumping back a second just to the Super Bowl stuff. Obviously that's you kind of rolled it off done it the last 3 years, and it's like, for so many people, that's the holy grail of what they want to do in terms of that's the place you want to have your creative shown. It's one of the brands in the biggest brands in the world now, and you've kind of got the marrying of both. So it's surely a huge high point in your career. And I suppose I'm interested just to kind of, do you feel completely like I have arrived, or you've more to do? But also, I suppose, in that journey with Super Bowl and Amazon, how much freedom are you given, Andy, and kind of how much control and direction there have you got?
It's very much a partnership. So I should fess up and say that I personally have got nothing really to do with the Super Bowl lads. I can't claim that. The agency does. Right. So I feel like I'm sort of, I've perhaps got us into a nice position to be able to work with a client as strong. I'd
say that's partly you're doing.
I hope so. I've got I'm cheering them on from the sidelines, let's say, and they're just a great team. As I say, they're obviously really smart people and very creative people, and then it just makes it pretty effortless to collaborate. They've got an amazing in-house creative director that our creative director, my partner, is very close to, and they chuck ideas around at quite early stages, and then it's a long process to making them happen, but it's very much together. I remember the very first one we did, which I think is a really good sort of example of how they work, is the brief was, how do you promote Alexa and remind everyone that she's the preeminent, the best form of voice technology, and we couldn't do without her. And at that time, certainly there was a couple of other pretenders to the throne, from really good big brands like Google and Apple and so on. Yeah. And so the idea was, well, Alexa's, she's got a human name for a starter, and she just feels like she possibly could be a bit more human than some of the others. So maybe there's something quite interesting, because we like when humans, when there's a tiny little flaw, when there's something, that's not always perfect. Yeah. So we thought, what if Alexa lost her voice? What would we all do then? And the way that came about was Danny was sort of thinking about, my creative partner was thinking about The Little Mermaid, and just shared a picture of The Little Mermaid, the Hans Christian Andersen and Disney sort of character that loses her voice, and shared that as a picture with the client. So it wasn't like and here's the script. It was just, if you thought about this, wouldn't it be amazing if this happened? Yeah. And then start riffing about it, and then it grows legs, and then fast forward 6 months, and we literally took the engineers and the product, the Alexa product, and made it an Easter egg in the product. So if you had said who's going to win the Super Bowl, the product would start, the Alexa would start coughing and then not be able to answer. And that created a lot of buzz, and, people's social media saying, what's happening to Alexa? And then you do the teaser, and then you do the ad, and you do a big, so it's a whole ecosystem of work around it. There you go. That's coughing right on point. Very,
yeah. Sorry, I can't stop coughing now. Yeah.
So yeah, that was, and I think that was really brave, because for a huge, one of the biggest brands in the world to show their product, not quite working on the biggest stage in world advertising, actually made us all feel much more positively about Amazon, because it was, there was self-deprecation. We had Jeff Bezos in the ad, asking what was going wrong, and it's a company that can have a little bit of fun with itself, which is a big learning. So yeah,
did you get to meet Jeff? Did you?
So Danny did, and Jeff is quite sort of hands-on with a lot of the work that we do. So everything, he sees things that we create on our holidays campaign that we've done for the last 4 years for them, with the singing boxes and things like that. Or we did an ad with a ballerina who couldn't get to dance at her sort of big concert at Christmas that you might have seen. So yeah, he's pretty hands-on on all of this kind of stuff.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. So, you know, as I said earlier, you've been busy, very busy as well on a book. So your book comes out when?
It's actually out in June, at the beginning of June. But the way that all sort of book things work is they're available for pre-order now. So you can order it now and it'll come in a couple of months.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think when this will be aired. So for those listening, we're recording today on the 24th of February. So most likely, by the time this goes out, Andy's book will be live. So if you check below in the comments, there'll be a link magically appearing so that you can go and get Andy's book. But Andy, I'm interested to hear all about it, where the idea came and kind of what the process has been like for you as well in doing so.
Yeah, great. So the book is called Go Luck Yourself. Which it's all about the idea of the role of luck in building a brand. And so I became aware of last year, actually, because it was obviously a very unlucky year in a lot of ways last year, sitting at home thinking, God, what have we all done to deserve this? And I realized that actually, I am a lot luckier than a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people got much worse off than you or I have. And so I thought, don't, wallow in self-pity here, mate. Maybe try and do something about it. And then secondly, I kind of thought, yeah, but this word luck is kind of interesting because obviously it's in my company name. But in 7 years of having a company called Lucky Generals, I've never, ever thought about luck or talked about it or researched it or found out what it's about. And the more I dug into it, the more I realized it was a bit of a taboo that nobody talks about luck. I mean, nobody ever I'm sure nobody comes on here probably until I've done it today and sort of talked about how lucky they've been, because generally luck is an insult, isn't it? If you say that somebody's been lucky, it's not a good thing. And I think, so the more I sort of discovered about that and the more I dug into things like psychology and so on, I realized there's a whole bunch of things that you can do to improve your luck. And crucially, that applies to organizations too. So the book is really about how you can stack the odds in your brand's favor. And then all the proceeds I'm giving to, or all the royalties are going to, as you said at the beginning, an organization that helps working class kids get a break into the industry. So there's sort of a book about luck that hopefully will, bring a bit of luck to other people.
So how do we go about engineering some more luck into our life then?
I think there's a whole bunch of things, and some of them we've probably almost touched on a little bit already, sort of inadvertently, but one's to appreciate what you've got. So much stuff in life, and I think this applies to companies too, is we don't realize all the amazing, lucky things that we have, and we maybe fixate on some of the stuff we don't have, but, there's a lovely Roald Dahl quote, which is, we're all of us a great deal luckier than we realize, which I think this comes from the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And I think that's true of, a lot of us as individuals, but also as brands. There's often a sort of they might be sitting on a gold mine of information or data, or they might have a really great history or logo or heritage that they could play off, and they just need someone to come in there and say, do you know what, that is amazing, you need to make more of that. So there's a whole bunch of strategies around that. Then there's a whole bunch of things about looking out for opportunities all over the place, because we can, especially at the moment, we can have our heads, buried in the day-to-day, and we can learn from all sorts of other sectors, or music or sport, or lots of the other best strategies come from elsewhere. And then something we've talked about is turning bad luck into good luck. So especially as we've all been dealt a load of bad luck, a lot of the best brand strategies are where you take a disaster or a crisis or a flaw and turn that into something useful. And then the final sort of section is all about practicing luck, which sounds like a bit of a oxymoron. It sort of sounds like being spontaneously, sort of being planned, spontaneous, approach. It sounds like it doesn't make sense, but I think you can practice being lucky, because you can create opportunities deliberately which will increase the chance of lucky stuff happening. Like serendipity. And a lot of the best companies I've worked with have done that. They've engineered almost luck into the process. They've left little gaps for little collisions to happen, but that's not the norm.
Yeah, it's like it's like you mentioned the Little Mermaid thing earlier on. Like by showing that Little Mermaid, that you're allowing luck to happen, and I think it's such an interesting topic. And I've also at the same time I've not read your book yet because I pre-ordered it, and we don't obviously have it in my hands yet. But I've been reading Rory Sutherland's book. Recently, and Rory's coming on the podcast in a few weeks' time, and I almost feel like he talks a lot about leaving room for magic, and it's kind of like you need to leave room for magic and luck. There's kind of both of those things plus logic that we require for amazing things to come to life, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And we, in our culture, especially in the West anyway, we've got a sort of a belief that luck is a bad thing. As I say, it's an insult, and also it's because it's a bit scary and it's a bit unpredictable. We like to try and limit it. So when in the very odd occasion that you do talk about luck in brand building or advertising, it's usually somebody saying things like, we don't want to leave anything to chance, or let's take luck out of the process. And you kind of think, well, why are you taking luck out of the process? You should be building luck into the process, like a really good thing. But it means that you have processes that make things more predictable, but also remove the chance for those lucky little things to happen. I feel like there's a lovely, in the book I sort of talk about Quincy Jones, who you will know is a great sort of one of the best all-time record producers, and he's got this brilliant phrase which he has on the wall of his studio, which is "Let the Lord walk through the room." I really love that idea. He's very methodological, so he's like quite a process, sort of guy, but he does sort of realize that there's a time where the magic or the luck has to take over, and so he'll deliberately leave little gaps for unusual collaborations or things that weren't in the script in the first place that might just happen on the day, sort of thing. And that's where the really exciting stuff happens.
Yeah, I think I was talking to someone about that because I read that in one of your articles. Say the quote again. It was leave enough room for.
Yeah, let the Lord walk through the room.
Yeah, and I think it's such a good point, because to put it another way of kind of thinking about it is that. So I'm very creative, ideas driven, but I'm terrible at structure and order, right? But I've got a co-director that's like the yin to my yang, Stephen. He's like my polar opposite, and we work great together. And we were talking a few months back that, especially during COVID as well, right, is that you can paralyze yourself with trying to look at spreadsheets and logic and details, where the human gut and luck and these things, there's something that we have inside us that you need to kind of let there be a room for, isn't there? And because you can just kind of try and you can try and look at everything from research and insight, but that's looking at the past. And to create amazing futures, you need to let human spirit in some sort of form have a space, don't you?
Definitely. I always sort of say, obviously as a strategist, I'm a great believer in rigor. But there comes a point when rigor becomes rigor mortis, and it becomes this sort of thing where, just like you say, everything is so predictable that it becomes a problem. Being predictable in our world is not necessarily a good thing, is it? It's a sort of we don't want our work to be predictable, probably in the outside world. So wouldn't it be nicer if we have that? What I love when you launch a new campaign, which would be true of those Super Bowl campaigns, where you're a little bit scared because you don't know how they're going to land. You're sort of excited by them, and there's that lovely frisson that you think, this could bomb, or will this be as good as the last one? Whereas if you just sort of rock up thinking, yeah, this is pretty average on point, it'll probably do a good job. I don't know. It's sort of, that might be more predictable. But I feel like there's more excitement and thrill in having a little bit of, oh God, this could go either way, sort of thing.
Yeah. So have you got any practical tips for how teams can do that? How they can kind of just leave that gap, or how they can, let that bit of luck, God, craziness, magic, whatever we want to call it, in there? How do we leave that gap?
I think there's lots of different ways. It's, organizations, sometimes they structure themselves in a way that allows for that. So I used to work with Paddy Power for a long time, and they've got a mischief department.
Yeah.
Like the best ever job title, head of mischief. And it's about they exist purely to do crazy fun, stuff that doesn't have to justify as a very really strong commercial return. It's just naughty pranks and stunts and stuff like that. So that's one way, giving it to sort of a certain group, or it's about making different groups come together. And I think Apple famously designed their buildings so that different departments have to sort of cross over each other's territory and cross-fertilize and stuff like that. Or a lot of companies in Silicon Valley at the moment ring fence a bit of time. I think 3i for many years have had a sort of a program whereby you have a certain amount of time ring fenced, for crazy projects that are not really on your job list, but they might turn out something incredible one day. And so I think that's what I mean about they're thought through. They're planned spontaneity. They are somebody thinking about how you can create luck. Which sounds like a contradiction, but
I think I get your point. It's like Made Brave. We have, the word bravery is hardwired into the brand, so we can kind of say to people, I know that doesn't feel safe, but be brave. Do the brave thing. So we're almost hardwiring it to the culture, and almost by having lucky generals, lucky in your name, it gives you that excuse to kind of we need to have space for luck. This might not work, but we might be lucky. I love that it's the same with your Yorkshire tea example. You found and you identified that the proper thing was already there, but you're now taking it and letting them use that to empower an idea.
And that would be a good example. The first sort of stuff I was talking about, the appreciating what you got, and sometimes these answers are like literally written on the wall, as it was in that case. It's on a factory wall, and we spotted it and turned into something. It's actually quite surprising how many great ideas come from that sort of thing. So a much more sort of long-running idea than that would be the Vorsprung durch Technik, which is the famous Audi line. So John Hegarty spotted that on a factory wall, walking around, in Germany, and thought, "Oh, that's amazing. What does it mean?" And then, rather than do what most of us would do, which is either forget about it or translate it, he just lifts it, lock, stock, and barrel. And I always think that's an amazing piece of. It's luck in the sense of he spotted the opportunity, but then you still have to do something with it, and most of us wouldn't have. And the other great one was, I think, Trevor Beattie, when he was in the office of FC UK, saw a fax coming out of the fax machine, so it shows it was a while ago, and all these faxes kept coming through with FC UK on, and he thought, God, that's amazing. That's that can be, I can just turn that into all these amazing provocative headlines. And most of us, again, would have just not paid attention to the fax machine. So having your eyes open all the time is like a really good way of increasing your chances of luck.
Yeah, I think when you're younger and as a creative, you often think that you have to create everything and you have to create something for people, but it's not. It's often seeing what they can't see in themselves, isn't it?
Like I think the best comedians do that, don't they? They find something that you do that you haven't really thought about before, but when they shine a light on it, then you go, "Oh my God, that is so true. I do that. That's horrendous," or "That's hilarious." And whereas if you totally invent something, you don't have that relatability, either for the comedian, you have people in the audience thinking, well, that's not true, I don't do that. Or for brands, it's harder for the brand to own it because you're thinking that's just a funny ad that's got nothing to do with the brand. Whereas if you think, no, that's rooted in what I think about the brand. Proper is what they say in Yorkshire, so I believe that would be something that Yorkshire Tea would say. That all kind of adds up then in a way that it wouldn't do for any old brand.
Yeah, no, fantastic. So Andy, I suppose your agency has grown pretty significantly in the last few years. I mean, how many people are you now?
I think we're about 80 in London and maybe 20 or 30 in New York, I think.
Yeah, I suppose, have you any lessons from growing through that growth of just, a lot of our listeners are kind of maybe smaller agencies, people getting started, and, I'm just keen to understand or know, anything you've learned through that process that you think's invaluable to pass down that you wish you'd known a few years ago.
Yeah, do you know what? It's not rocket science, I don't think. And I'm sure you and many of your people watching or listening to this will sort of get this, but To me, it's not about trying to be big for the sake of it. We never want to do that. We would be very happy if we're a lot smaller, but still having as much fun and as much fulfillment. So I think if you pursue growth for its own sake, it can have a corrosive effect, because then you start chasing opportunities that you might not be right for and all the rest of it. So we've never really thought about our size. We've just thought about the quality of our work. So that sort of helps. Then it doesn't become an obsession, that we're always thinking about. That's why I could hardly think about when you asked us. It's not really something I ever really think about. But and then the other thing is just how important culture is. Every single, especially at that size, when you hire one person, that's quite a big chunk of the culture. Because percentage-wise, you're sort of maybe, but certainly back in the early days when we were 20 people, if you hired one person, that's whatever that is, 1/20th, so 5% of the company. So it's like important, and that person can be, somebody on reception. We've had amazing people on reception because that's the front of house. That is where first impressions are set, and just believing that everyone in the company can play that role to create the company culture. That's all we've got at the end of any creative business, and you will know this, is we're all people businesses, so we're dependent on the people.
Yeah, and I suppose then in terms of kind of that culture, it's something I'm very interested in, and kind of, that I often believe brands are built from the inside out, and that if you can really embed, like strong values in the business and kind of a sense of purpose, a sense of direction, for the team, that they will go on to grow amazing brands. I suppose I'm just interested to know what you think makes a great culture. Is there any lessons just in terms of that come to mind?
I think it is about it's partly about leadership, isn't it? So whoever starts a place up has to set an example and lead by example, and even when that costs them money, there's that old phrase, principle's not a principle until it costs you. So it requires you to turn down. It's easy to say that we'll only pitch for this kind of business, but then when somebody comes and dangles a big bag of money in front of you to do something that would be not fun, then it requires you to say no to it. So I think saying no actually is quite a big part of our culture. Define yourself also by what you're not going to do, and then it's just empowering and allowing people to sort of not making it set in stone. Like, I think encouraging other people to build it as they go, and that it's not, this is the only way that we do things around here. It's sort of, you set a general direction of travel. I mean, I think the other thing is we've found, and then a few of the same, is like we try not to be too heavy-handed about sort of setting out in guidelines. This is our company culture. It sort of should feel like a bit more organic, and it's something we live and breathe, rather than sort of create pyramids and brand onions and stuff like that. Only because because we do that sort of stuff for our clients, but I think for an organization of our size, it just lives and breathes with the individual human beings, and we don't need to be too formal about it, I don't think.
Yeah, well, I think there's something nice someone said to me recently, is like, rather than thinking about people as a culture fit for your business, think about them as a culture add. And so every time you go to hire, like, what else can that bring? And
totally. I think that's really good. Otherwise, you sort of get into that spiral of just hiring people like you, and there's obviously got to be a sort of some sort of spiritual sort of kind of connection, I guess, if you like. If that's not too weird a thing to say, but just so many different flavors of that, and that's what will keep you alive and growing. And
there's like something that feeds through the middle. We had Philip Mounier, the co-founder of Sid Lee. They've got, I think, over 1,000 people in his agency, and he quite nicely put it that that there's a kind of Sid Lee culture, but in Paris they've got some Parisness, and and Toronto they've got some of that, and there's something that unites them all, but they almost let each different area kind of add their own flavor, which I also think is lovely. And he also mentioned that once you have all those different locations, you get different viewpoints from everywhere, and it's a real nice melting pot for creativity.
Definitely. And you can't, when we went over to New York, we were very mindful that we, just because we've been successful over here, you can't be big-headed and think that you're going to smash it over there. And it is a different market, and we've known lots of American agencies with great reputations who've sort of not done as well in the UK. So it is about having a bit of our cultural DNA. So we literally sent our managing director over there. So he was kind of our DNA, but then building around that an American team and an American culture and the American flavor of us, sort of thing. Is you need a bit of both, I think.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Now, this is a question we'd like to ask everyone, and we're very interested in your definition of this, but it's not always an easy one to get on the spot. If you need some thinking time, we're very, I suppose, interested to hear your definition of brand. Brand is a thing that people say, gets thrown around everywhere, and over many years we've all developed ways of describing it. Jeff Bezos, as an example, says it's what other people say about you when you're not in the room. Marty Neumeier, we had on the podcast on here as well. He talks about it's not a visual facade; it's a living pattern of behaviour. Of behaviours, a pattern of behaviour. If you need a minute to think, I'm going to give you a minute to think, but I'm pretty sure you'll have a good answer wrapped up there somewhere.
I think the way I always talk about it is it's how people feel about you, how people genuinely feel about you. There's been lots of people observe similar things. I think Jeff Bezos' sort of quote is a little bit in that direction, and I feel like maybe Jeremy Bullmore, the great wise old man of British advertising, maybe said something like it's how other people think about you. And I'm sort of in that camp. Maybe it's more about how they feel about you rather than think. Because I just don't think that people think all that much about brands, but they have a kind of a rough feeling. And often the feeling is driven not by advertising, it's by how brands behave. I think that's what we increasingly realise now, isn't it? It's what the brands do. What was that? Was it Maya? So I'm now just doing this off the cuff, which is probably disastrous. Bad move, trying to remember quotes but isn't it Maya Angelou had said something like, people won't remember what you did or what you said to them, but they'll remember how they made you feel, I think. So I feel like that's, I've had to get the cogs turning there, but I feel like that's very true of brands. We've got very, very patchy feelings about most brands, and for a lot of brands we don't remember anything because they've never made us feel anything, but there's a sort of there might just be a slight fuzzy feeling that they're quite nice and they're not so nice, and it might be not that much deeper than that.
I think it's kind of reputation, isn't it? All of it feeds back to reputation. So how someone makes you feel, it's your reputation to me is X, or how you made me think, or how you made The big thing, I think, the big, all of those, whatever the definition is, I think the ones that we've just talked about there reflect an acceptance that these are not things that we can try and shape, but we don't own them and we don't create them, and they don't live in our little PowerPoint slides, and they're not static either. Because that was old school marketing, wasn't it? This kind of sense that we've created the brand, and the brand is what I say it is here on this slide. And it will never change for 40 years, and it sort of lives, carved into stone. It was brand. It was literally pyramids and temples and things like that. Was kind of quite a telling metaphor. And I think now these things are just much more loose than that, and they are not on my PowerPoint slide. They're in other people's heads and hearts. Yeah, exactly. And I think Martin Neumeier, if I'm remembering correct, he said it's not what we say it is; it's what they say it is, and that's. Your point. Exactly. Now, Jessica Walsh, Sigma Sarah Walsh, she says, what does she say? She says we should have written these down. I should have written these down. But she said something along the lines of, if nobody hates it, no one loves it. And I suppose I'm just interested. I think it's really nice in terms of where brand and business is going, is that there's transparency now, that we have to stand for and do good things, right? People have to be transparent right through their business, and it's become much more. Brands have to be responsible. They're responsible for the planet, responsible for people. But I suppose, just from your point of view, in terms of like having a real stance, we've got some brands that really go for it, some that don't. How important do you think that is in today's world?
Again, I would sort of say it's. Well, I think brands should have a stance. I don't think it always has to be a particularly profound sort of social purpose stance. Again, it goes back to a little point about some in the way that some people, that comes really natural to them, and they have strong, genuinely held beliefs. And other guys are just, our people are lighter and just they've still got a really strong personality, but they're just not they're not politically sort of motivated. For instance, I think it's the same with brands. I think one of the mistakes again of recent years is this has been brands feeling that they do need to have a particularly strong political belief. Then it doesn't have anything to do with even the category they're in, let alone what they actually do. And sometimes it can be in complete contrast to what they do, and then we just see through it, and it sort of annoys us rather than sort of attracts us to a brand like that. But if it's sincerely held, I mean, then that is, all you're doing is really sort of telling the truth about what you feel. The classic example for us would be the Co-op, which is 175 years old and was founded, by some men in Rochdale as a way of helping the community. And ever since then, you spend money there, some of the money goes to the community. So that is written into their spirit and what they have done for the last 175 years. So it's literally, so the line that we've got for the Co-op is, it's what we do. I mean, it's not rocket science, this stuff. It's not it's not a CSR campaign, and it's not something that we've done for a Super Bowl spot. It is just a shrug to it. It's what we do. And I feel like, I think all brands should have that sort of honesty to them. I mean, another great quote for sort of is, and I will remember this one because it's my favorite, is Dolly Parton said, find out who you are and do it on purpose. Have you heard that one before? So
someone was talking to me about Dolly Parton this morning. I'm trying to remember who I was speaking to.
She's obviously, we all love her, even more now because she sort of helped find a vaccine last year. But I think that thing, find out who you are and do it on purpose, is like brilliant, because a lot of brands they skip the first bit about finding out who they are, and then they try and find a purpose that's got nothing to do with what they genuinely are, so it feels false. And then they try and work backwards. They'll have a brainstorm with a marketing department about what should our brand purpose be, and that's not how it works. The brand purpose has got to be something that you had in the first place. Why did you literally start this company, and what do you do every day? And then we can find a nice way to bring it to life, maybe, but you can't just make this stuff up, I don't think.
It's trying to find authentically what's actually there. Deep. And why did you get out of your bed the first day to start this thing up? So I'm just remembering the Dolly Parton thing. Someone said to me this, I can't remember exactly who, but I will remember. But they said, there's a campaign. I can't remember who said it was, but it'll come to me soon. But she's, instead of working 9 to 5, they've flipped it to working 5 till 9, and it's about she's doing some sort of campaign about your nighttime hustle.
Amazing.
So I think what I've realised is I need a lot more Dolly Parton quotes from now on.
She's absolutely phenomenal. I think she's. I think she created 2 songs, wasn't it? She wrote 2 songs on the same day. I think I Will Always Love You and Jolene. And then the joke goes, she probably wrote them 9 till 5 as well, within those working hours. But I know that she certainly wrote them on the same day, so it's pretty amazing.
Well, so I'll need to, I think Dolly Parton has to go on the list of brand experts that are coming on the show in the future. I think that needs to be one on the hit list. Well, Andy, I'm conscious of time, but we do have quite a lot of kind of younger creatives who listen to the show, who are trying to find their way into this world. Who it's obviously a little bit more challenging, although there could be more opportunity at the moment. Is another way to look at it. I suppose for them, how could they engineer a little bit more luck into getting into the industry at the moment? Is there anything advice-wise that you could give to kind of younger creatives to help them get a kickstart and find their way into where you are now, kind of?
Yeah, oh God. Well, I think number one is just keep at it. It is tough, and I'm sure it's tougher now than it's ever been, but keep at it. You just unfortunately have to be really resilient getting into the industry, and then you've got to be resilient when you're in, because of course we're in a world where ideas get, unfortunately, killed and broken and changed all the time. You've got to bounce back and find ways of dealing with that. So keep at it. And then the second thing, make sure you've got a broad view of creativity. And because I think agencies are now increasingly interested in, yes, people who can come up with interesting ideas in the usual sort of media, but an idea could be a product idea or a social initiative or a service, innovation, or there might be all sorts of different things that you could describe as an idea. So we're looking out for interesting ideas in culture generally, not just can you design a nice press ad in the way that we cared about 20 or 30 years ago. And then my sort of final top tip maybe would be sort of, again, one of the rules of go luck yourself is if you start with, let's try and find a negative about the brief that you're working on and turn that into positive. That is often where a lot of the best and edgiest and most unusual work comes, because of course most of the time we ask ourselves, well, what's the most positive advantage of this brand? What's the best thing we can say about it? And yeah, that often leads to good places. But sometimes if you say, what is the worst thing that anyone would ever say about this brand, that can get you to counterintuitive ideas like good things come to those who wait, and we take the idea that Guinness takes ages to get served. That's been turned into a positive. That's a more interesting strategy than just talking about how lovely the taste of the Guinness is. So, so what I always do is when I get a brief, is I go on social media and I find out what are the most unpleasant jokes people make about the brand, because people obviously slag off brands and tease them or do cartoons or. And I think once you know what comedians are saying or cruel people on social media are really saying about the brand, there's often quite sort of a cutting truth there that you can sort of play with a little bit.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That now any focus group just needs to be a group of comedians.
Yeah, exactly.
What can you find fault here?
Yeah.
And then there's our insight for anything we take forward. Well, Andy, that was a great insight to leave us with, and I think a really nice tip for everyone. And I'm going to take it and stick it in my brain as well, because I think it's a really nice one. For those that are listening, if you want to, you'll be able to find Andy's book. We'll post a link in the comments below, but it's available on Amazon. It's called Go Luck Yourself, and date of coming out again, Andy, is?
Well, it's out in June, but you can pre-order it now. And actually, it's really helpful if you pre-order it now, because it gets all the algorithms going. So if you fancy it, order it now and then forget about it for a little while, and it'll be out at the beginning of June.
Yes, definitely do the pre-order. Jeff Bezos's algorithm will definitely look much more favorably upon the book. So thanks for listening. If you would like to support the podcast, please do rate and review us. It does help us get the word out. We publish a new episode on the last Monday of every month, kind of. Sometimes we miss it. Sometimes it's a day before, sometimes it's a day after. But Andy, thank you so much. You've been an absolute delight. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much. Cheers.